Yeah, the crawler wild's always bringing me home. Crawler wild's always bringing me home. Crawler wild's always bringing me home.
I am so excited to have my friend Tamara here from the Orca Conservancy. How are you doing today, Tamara?
Hi, I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I am so happy to have you on. We've been like connecting over the years and with Orca Conservancy, and I'm so excited to finally have you on to get to chat.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here finally. Thank
Yes.
you so much for having me and giving me the platform to talk about Southern residents.
Yes. So for people listening that don't know, we first connected through my clothing brand, Femme Sauvage, and the orchid designs that we're both wearing. $5 of that goes to the Orca Conservancy, which and helps all the wonderful things that you guys do as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for supporting our work. It's awesome.
Yeah. So to start off, tell me how you first started working with the Orca Conservancy.
So, short story long, as I always say. I've actually been obsessed with orcas since I can remember. And I started studying marine biology in high school, decided the science route wasn't necessarily for me. Kind of just accepted like, oh, I don't think I can turn working with orcas into a job. And so I just ended up getting volunteer roles and interning just because it was something I really cared about. And in that time, I worked in e commerce for about 9 years doing various roles and ended with digital marketing. And so, as I was learning that skill set in my professional job, I started rolling that into my volunteer work. I took over our social media channel, grew that to be very successful, and just kind of showed like this work had value. And I started getting a budget. And then ultimately, that turned into me getting a job full time. And so, I basically run all of our digital channels. I run our website, our social media marketing, you name it. If it's digital, I'm doing it. And then that's just one of the facets of my role, but that's how it came to be.
I love that so much. And I feel like that's really inspiring for people that don't necessarily want to go do the science route, but have their heart in loving animals or just, wanting to be involved in nature or the environment. So I love that story. I think that's so inspiring.
Thank you. I love to use that to tell people like science isn't the only way into conservation. There, nonprofits need so many other roles to function, whether it's graphic design or an accountant, HR, all kinds of stuff. So there's this misconception that the only way into conservation is science, and that's not true. We actually need a lot of skill sets to make what we do possible.
Yeah, and I love that too because obviously like like with I pride myself in like find your wild. Everybody finds their niche and what's good for them and finding what they love and you don't have to be type boxed into one certain role or there's one certain thing that you have to do. Like it's really nice that there's so many avenues now and with the internet too. I think just like expanding what's needed and getting more awareness and stuff is really beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, and I like to also tell people that who want to get involved, it's find what you're good at and find what you love and bring them together, and that is the best way that you can get involved in a cause.
It's so cool. I really love that. And Orca Conservancy does a lot of your primary focus is on the southern resident killer whales.
Correct. And the populations that we have in the North Pacific. So there's two other populations. We have the bigs or transients, which are the mammal eating ecotype, and then there are offshores. But our primary focus is on the southern residents as they are critically endangered and are sadly on the brink of extinction.
Yeah, I had another podcast guest on. I don't know if you know her, Kay Passionate. But she's a YouTuber and we were kind of talking about it, and she was saying that this would be the first extinction that we would know all of the animals' names. So which is pretty sad. And I hope with what you guys are doing, that will change as well. And what are, I guess, like for people, just to start off, because you said there are different ecotypes, right?
Mhm.
So, I guess people just think, oh, black and white whales, killer whales. What are so there's a few different types, but what are the ones that you guys see by you in the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah, so I just want to preface this with last summer there was a proposal to actually separate two of the species. And from
Mm,
what I understand, what I've heard, this proposal was denied, not because they are different species, but because the committee that decides it wanted to wait until they could categorize all species of orcas. But the thing is, in other populations, we don't know as much about them as we do some of these other ones. So it gets really nuanced and complicated. But basically, think of every population in different parts of the world of orcas. Think of them as different species because they are genetically distinct. They have adapted over hundreds of thousands of years for their environment and their prey type. So last the information's always changing, especially for the Atlantic orca. So I don't even know what the number is anymore.
yeah.
And that if you've ever seen the poster that shows all the ecotypes of killer whales, that's even changed. Like that's outdated now. But to specify what we have in the North Pacific, so again, we have the three populations. We have the southern residents, which are fish eating killer whales. We have transient or the Biggs killer whales, which are the mammal eating ecotype. And then we have offshores, which I've never seen them. Very little is known about them because they typically range 10 plus miles off the coast and are more oceanic. So they're
Mhm.
incredibly difficult to study and incredibly rare to see as well. So a lot of what we know about that population is done from necropsies when a deceased one washes up and we can study them. So through that kind of information, they've determined that some of the things that type preys on are sharks. But I'm
Mm.
going to dial it back and focus more on our residents and transients. So, kind of jumping ahead of myself, a lot of people are like, well, why are the southern residents not doing well? Okay, it's because they don't have enough to eat because they're dependent on salmon. And their cousins, the bigs, eat marine mammals. So the question is, why can't the southern residents just switch and start eating marine mammals like the bigs? And the answer is because they're specialist predators that have adapted over 700,000 of years. And transients or bigs are actually a bigger type of orca. They have a larger jaw with different structured jaw design
Yeah.
and thicker, more robust teeth designed for ripping hide and breaking through skeletons, as were the southern residents, smaller in size, and have a jaw that is adapted for fish. And so, morphology studies done on captive whales suggest that if southern residents were to try to eat a large marine mammal like a sea lion or a seal, they could actually risk injuring their jaws. Think of it as
Mhm.
it'd be like the equivalent of if humans just decided that, oh, today I'm going to try to eat a rock. Like we're not equipped
Right.
to do that. And
Yeah.
so it's not a realistic ask to think that these animals can just prey switch when they're literally physically designed and culturally adapted for that prey. So those are the two we see the most: the transients and the southern residents. And again, the southern residents prey on salmon, and 100% of their diet is fish, and transients eat marine mammals. So two very different types of killer whales. Transients are doing very well. Southern residents are not.
Right. So also, and it's not like they could interbreed, right? Like for people, I guess, that don't understand that they can't, like, they have their own dialects as well, right? Because they're highly intelligent animals. So it's like two different, um, they're obviously two different types of orcas, but they can't interbreed or anything like that. They don't usually connect in that way, right?
So they actually can, and we know that because of captivity where it's forced, but in the
Okay.
wild, they don't. They
They don't. Yeah.
completely avoid one another. And the very rare times where these ecotypes have come across one another, they'll either just completely swim away in opposite directions, or once, like this has happened, documented just a few times. Sometimes the southern residents will actually become very aggressive towards the transients and chase them out of an area. So
Mm,
they're capable of breeding. They just their cultural divide and their lifestyles make it so they do not
they do.
interact. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
pretty interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah. And I'm assuming, I don't know, I guess it kind of makes sense to me. Like the southern residents are smaller. So I guess like to be more aggressive, to be like, hey, get out of our area, protecting
Yeah,
the area.
yeah, it's interesting because I've been in situations where I've watched J-Pod over here and then right over there are transients and they don't bother each other, they leave each other alone. So it's kind of rare as far as our observations go that we see them showing each other off. And I've talked about it with Dr. David Bain, Orca Conservancy's chief scientist. He's been studying killer whales for longer than I've been alive. um, and I was asking him because he's actually one of the people I know who's seen this with northern residents. Side
Mhm.
note, northern residents is another, they fall under the resident ecotype. They're just in a different habitat range, kind of more north to where the
Mhm.
southern residents range. But what's really interesting is despite the fact that they're the same ecotype, those two do not interact either.
Wow.
You'd think they would because they're all fish eaters and they have very similar cultures, but they don't.
Mhm.
But anyway, so he's had a lot of encounters where he's seen northern residents shooing away transients, and so I've asked
Interesting.
him about it, and I'm like, yeah, we know about this happening a few times with southern residents, but now that we have transients in the area a lot more than we did 10 years ago because their food is very plentiful, so now we see them here a lot. I was like, there's been so many times I've seen J-Pod over here and these transients over here, or they'll even cross spots in the same area and don't interact. And so, I was trying to pick his brain to be like, why does it happen sometimes and not other times? And what he explained is it's possible that since transients are here a lot more than they used to be,
Mhm.
everybody's just getting used to one another because back in the
Right.
day when the pinniped population hadn't rebounded from the 60s and 70s, we didn't have transients here. And so the southern residents were used to having it all to themselves. And so maybe when transients started coming back, residents are like, what are you doing? And then now they've just learned to kind of coexist the way they do in other places.
That's so funny, right? Yeah, learn to coexist, orcas, right? You gotta
Yeah, yeah.
coexist,
They're not too different than humans, really.
right? It's so funny. And the northern residents, are they endangered as well?
So in Canada, they are enlisted as threatened, but their population is doing significantly better than the southern residents, and they have far more members than the southern residents.
Wow, that's so interesting. It just goes to show you, area and everything like that. And so I'd love for you to maybe just explain, what's making it hard for the southern residents to thrive. I know that's like a big question because I know there's a lot that goes into
Yeah.
that, but yeah.
Yeah, so we have the saying the southern residents are dying a death of a thousand cuts. There's so many
Mm.
contributing factors, but on the subject of northern residents, I kind of want to use this example because it shows the picture a little bit better. So one of the
Mhm.
huge issues with the southern residents is lack of food. They depend on Chinook salmon, which makes about upwards of 80% of their diet. And they do eat other types of fish, but Chinook salmon or king salmon, some people might know it better as. Um, it's the biggest of the salmonoid species. It's the fattiest, so it's the most nutritional for the southern residents. That's why it's preferred. So, with the lack of food, part of the issue is mismanagement of fisheries. And so, what we're seeing with southern and northern residents is we're now learning that salmon stocks that have come from rivers in Oregon, Washington, Canada will actually travel all the way up to Alaska and then come back down and return to their rivers here. So
Mm.
what's happening is the southeastern Alaska fisheries are being given their numbers based on not southern residents because they're thinking like, oh, these are Alaskan fish, when really much of those fish captured are coming from these waterways. So they're given these large numbers they're allowed to catch, and then what they don't catch comes through northern resident habitat. So then northern residents get first grabs, and then what's left that makes it down to southern BC and Washington and Oregon, like between fishing and natural predation, which granted, we're not upset that the northern residents are eating well.
Of
Um,
course, right?
I mean, in before humans intervened, there was enough fish for everybody, and so now there's a lot of legal efforts to try to better manage those Alaska fisheries to account for the fact that much of these fish come from southern resident areas. So fisheries are an issue. Dams are a huge issue. They block vital habitat for salmon. It makes it really hard for salmon to go back to their spawning grounds, and it makes it hard for juvenile salmon to get into the ocean. And there's another dam being proposed in Washington that we're trying to block. There's a lot going on there.
Yikes,
Pollution
yeah.
is a big factor. Climate change. Yeah, there's just so much to it. And looking at the southern residents specifically, the three main problems that have been identified are lack of food, noise pollution created by shipping, and toxic pollution. So
Yeah.
lots going on with what's threatening these animals. And what's really interesting about the pollution and the noise is the transients are exposed to the same issues. And in fact, they actually have higher volumes of toxins in their body because they're kind of a peg up on the food chain.
Mhm.
But their population is thriving. And the major difference between transients and residents is the transients have a very ample food source, and the southern residents do not.
That's very interesting. And I don't know if this would be like taken to effect as well, but could it be also that they're bigger so that way it's like not as like because the southern residents are smaller, so it's more compacted, the toxins and pollutants, or it kind of doesn't really matter.
No, the size doesn't matter too much. What matters is so basically the three things: lack of food, boat pollution, and toxic pollution are all compounding one another, creating synergistic effects, so making one another worse. So
Got
in the
it.
case of body with the pollution and the food, orcas are unique in the fact that they never evolved to eliminate toxins out of their bodies the way that other species do. So when they have toxins in their bodies, they store them for their entire lives. And a lot of
Mhm.
these forever chemicals that are getting into their bodies um, are fat soluble or fat loving chemicals, and so they store in their fatty lipid cells. Now, orcas, like humans, when they don't get enough to eat, so which they're not, they start to break down those fat reserves, which are full of these toxins, and it creates everything from immunity issues to all the way up. I think there's been some links to even cancer with some of
Um,
these toxins. And then it gets even worse because when a female gives birth, she is offloading those toxins to the new calf. And then the milk that the calf drinks in nursing is from those fatty lipid cells. So it's basically just poisoned milk that these calves are drinking. And so why you see the difference between the transients and the southern residents is the fact that the transients have ample food, and so they're not depending on those fat reserves as much as the southern residents.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. Oh, it's so sad. And then there was the one, it happened twice with that one killer whale. I forget her name that unfortunately
J35.
J35 and her
Mhm.
calf. This was recent, but it also happened a couple of years ago where she carried, they basically named it a tour of grief where she was carrying her dead calf for a couple of weeks. How long was
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, so the first time she did it, which was 2018, she carried the calf for 17 days and over 1,000 miles. And then she did it again this past January. I know it was over a week, but then they returned out to the ocean, and so it wasn't clear when she dropped the calf. But um, I actually don't think this behavior is terribly unusual. I actually think it
Mm,
happens a lot more than we realize. The thing is, we only know it's happening when they're in a vicinity that we can see them. But
sure.
we do know it's happened with another Southern resident, J31, did the same thing. I want to say in 2016. Um, and then it's happened in other orca populations, and it's even happened in bottlenose dolphin populations. So um, I interpret it as grief. So I think that the saying tour of grief is very spot on. I think we know these animals are highly intelligent and very emotional. And so, I always say it's got to be one of the hardest things a human can go through to lose a child.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on. And I think that we're just seeing them. Some people say, oh, they're trying to tell us something. And I would disagree with that. It's kind of inserting the human narrative into something that's really not. I think it's
Right.
what we are seeing is just animals expressing grief, whether we're
Yeah.
there or not. And so we know that a lot of these females will be pregnant. And then when we see them come back from the ocean months later, they're not pregnant and there's no calf. So I actually think it happens a lot more than we know.
Yeah, because it's only, you only have a little bit, and because of the protection around them, you have to give them ample space and can only view them when you see them. So obviously, like you said, that makes it hard to scientifically kind of, uh, see what's happening. But when that happened, the first time I was very sad, but then after the second time that happened, I related to that so much because I also lost a baby. And then um there's something unfortunately so relatable. And it's so sad that, like you said, it's like 1,000 little cuts that these orcas are going through, and every little thing is compacted on top of each other. Like, they need the Chinook salmon because they're, that's like the type of fat that they need in order to provide, especially when animals are pregnant. They need all of that extra fat storage and extra oomph to give them to be able to give birth. So I think that that was really heartbreaking, but I think very it really gave a spotlight to the southern residents, in a bittersweet kind of a way. Um and But I guess there is some good news, right? There was recently a new calf that we have seen.
Yeah, so cautious good news.
Of course, yeah,
I
right.
mean, we always want to celebrate calves, but they have a 50% chance of not surviving past their first birthday.
Yeah.
So last year was rough. We had three newborn calves all die within a month or 2 months of their birth. And so I feel it's interesting because, I've been following this population since I was a kid. So I know not to get attached to them, but we had such a run of successful births ahead of that. We had a small little baby boom that, oh, yay, we're getting excited about calves. And then last year kind of was a smack in the face of reality like, no, this population is still struggling. And so, because of those three losses last year, and I had the opportunity to see two out of the three of them before they passed away,
Mm.
that was a hard pill to swallow. And then now
Yeah.
with any new one, I feel like I have a little PTSD from
Rightly
those
so.
losses last year, where I'm just like, I feel like I don't want to say anything. I don't want to, like, I don't want to jinx it. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we have had two new ones. Well, we had J62, who was born right around the same time. J61, that was J35, Telequa's last calf that passed away that she carried around. So those two were born like right within days of each other. And then so J62 it sounds like is doing well. Every time I've had the opportunity to see her, she's always playing with big sister J58,
Oh, that's
and she
lovely.
seems very active and energetic. And according to the Center for Whale Research, sounds like she's filling out well. So that's great news. And then There was another one that just showed up as of last week, J63, who
Oh yeah.
is said at this point in time, is said to be the calf of J40 Settles, who's one of my favorites, and that's who this fluke is.
Oh,
So very exciting, but also because it's her first, it's also we're very cautious, we're very nervous. Kind of like how I was talking about the toxic offload to the calves. The
right,
first calf born to a female always gets the highest toxic offload because it's the first. And so
right.
the mother's getting is all of those toxins are being released through her body. So when she has a second calf, there isn't it's basically, think of it as starting from a lower level and then building up. So it hasn't had time to accumulate the way that it has for first calves. So second calves tend to do better than
Right.
first calves. So
Fingers crossed for her.
fingers crossed. Yeah, first time moms can have a higher mortality rate for calves. So very cautiously excited, but cautious nonetheless.
Yeah, and also you said like J-Pod, which is the other very cool thing is that there's a couple of different pods, and um, you're able to distinguish between them based off of the saddle patches off of their um, right under their dorsal fins, right?
Yeah, so within the Southern residents, we have JK and L pods, which make up what's called J clan.
Mm.
And clans are determined by dialect and a shared maternal ancestor. So in the northern residents, you have different clans as well. But so yeah, the southern residents, there's three pod JK and L. We can tell them apart by their dorsal fins, their saddle patches, and their eye patches. And sometimes they'll have other unique features like K16 has a freckle on her chin, or
That's cool.
K22 and J31 have kind of like almost ocean wave style, like the white chin under the eye patch, how it has a little tuft that comes up below the
Hmm.
eyeball. They
Yeah.
have like three of those little jaggedy edges that almost makes like a wave pattern.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
yeah, there's interesting variations of just the markings, but saddle patches and eye patches specifically, they are all very unique to each individual whale, just like a fingerprint. And the left and the right side ones also are different. So
Hmm. Oh,
if
that's
you
cool.
look
I didn't
at,
know that.
yeah, if you look at an ID guide, you'll usually see a left shot and a right shot, and it's interesting to see the variations of just, one orca might have a completely open saddle patch on the left side and completely closed on the right side. But
Wow.
so depending on the direction they're traveling, you need to, it's not just
Yeah.
memorizing one saddle patch for one whale. You have to remember there's two and plenty of
Yeah.
eye patches as well.
It's like eyeliner. They're sisters, not twins.
Yeah, exactly. That comparison.
That's so funny. That's
Yeah.
that's pretty cool too. I love seeing the uniqueness and especially like the individual aspect of each of these animals and how that plays such an important role in the ecosystem as a whole. I remember chatting with my friend Rachel Tilseth, and she said a lot of the big focus for conservation now is focusing on like individuals within whatever species or whatever that is, and their stories, especially like Tahlequah's, are super inspiring, and I think just give a bigger picture, that sometimes it's like, oh, they're not just orcas, they're moms, they're sisters, and especially orcas being so family oriented. Wolves of the sea really, I love that term too, because it really reminds me of like wolf packs and the intelligence of both of those creatures and how family oriented they both are too.
Yeah, absolutely. I could go on for hours and hours about the dynamics or the personalities of some of the orcas because I'm blessed to have the opportunity to be able to spend time with them regularly, and that's over time I've learned to just be able to identify a lot of them just by looking at them. But over that time, you learn so much about them, and I think one of my like I have a couple favorite stories to kind of liken them to, we try not to anthropomorphize too much, but
Sure.
it's hard not to because one, we understand the human world through the human brain, and two, there's so many similarities between human culture and orchid culture. And a couple summers ago, there was when J57, who's the second surviving calf born to J35 Telequas, so his name's
Mm.
Phoenix. Phoenix and Crescent were born, so J58 were born the same year and became very good friends. But there was one day where I want to say it was J35 Telequa was babysitting, had J58 and J57 who were playing, and she was off on her own while all the adults were hanging out elsewhere. And so sometimes we'll see like all the moms get together with all the kids, and then the older ones or the ones that don't have kids or the adults will go do other, it's very
Oh, that's
similar to
funny.
humans. And then there's this young whale or L125 element in L-Pod. And L-Pod actually travels. Researchers have said if they had started cataloging the orcas today, L-Pod would actually have been two separate pods because they
Mm.
do break up and travel separately. So in one of the groups of L-Pod is L125 element, who's a toddler now, and then all of the other babies are in the other group. And so L125 element is kind of like a lone youngster in her family, and every time I see that matriline get together with other matrilines, she every single time is playing with all of the little kids. So
Aw.
last winter I saw them in the South Sound, and she was playing with one L126 and L127 and just like the biggest cuddle party. And then the year before that I saw them with K's, and she was playing with K45 Prosper, and it's like it's so adorable because it's like, seeing a little kid getting together with their best friends or their cousins, like, oh yeah, I get to have a little play party.
Oh my God, that's so cute. It is kind of hard to not anthropomorphize, right?
Oh, so hard.
But right, like there's this like balance of like I don't know, I feel like I've talked to like a couple of friends about this is like to try to get more people to connect and care. Like I think like we have to lead with the heart a little bit, but then sometimes I think that there's balance, right? Like we can't go too far
Absolutely.
in one way or the other. But I think it makes it pretty hard too because in one way you're like I can see all of these connections, but then I think that when you go too far, to like the heart and being like, well, I think like one of the examples you use is like they're trying to show us something, right? There's only so many things that animals would be able to actually do and accomplish. And that's not to say they aren't intelligent, but I think that they're probably just intelligent in a different way that like us humans can't recognize. But it's this balance, right? That's really hard, I'm sure, for conservationists like yourself to be able to know where that line is of like, how do we get people to draw in and connect and um, love these animals and connect with them with their hearts, but then also to make sure that we're doing right by them by also respecting what they are as animals and not trying to almost like put words in their mouth, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is a fine balance. And there's a big push and pull between the emotional side and the scientific side. And I work with scientists, and I myself am a storyteller. And so, I always try to put it through like a personal lens, because I think there is such value and the emotional connection that people can have. Um, and I also think there's an important, I feel like there's pros and cons of both. Like,
Right.
I feel like the danger with being, I'm going to use the example of making, the whales trying to tell us something. Maybe they are, maybe they are, but I feel like there's kind of this tendency to inject ourselves into these whales' lives when we don't really know. And so I feel like the danger with that is you can kind of create misinformation, you can kind of go against science, and then inversely, I feel like science can be so cut and dry that if I were to take my channel and just report it like it was like a research paper, no one's that's not going to resonate with people. So
Right.
You know, it's undeniable that you can observe these animals, and if you observe them long enough, it's undeniable the bonds that they have and the connections and all of that. So that's not, you know, that's not being overly emotional, but there it is a fine line.
Right.
I think there's value in both science and storytelling, but if storytelling is coming at the cost of denying facts or science or kind of just
Yep.
making it about ourselves, I think that's where I kind of draw the line for myself and how I operate on our channels. But
Yeah, I
I
think
do
that's
think it,
fair.
yeah, the connection's important. It really is, but you know, there is a fine line to, are you just placating how you feel, or is this, you know, what's the value in this?
Right. Yeah. Like how I look at it is like I relate to Tahlequah because she lost children and like I lost a child and that's very sad. That and I can relate to her in that way and you know that being unfortunately a very popular subject of mothers in general losing their young ones. But I think that then that would also like in my mind, like this is just my like opinion, then that makes me more inspired to help them in the long run, right? So like I'm not, you know, saying that that was like a specific thing, but like I could also be like, okay, that was a symbol of something, like a symbol of like, you know, representing that we need to like, you know, enact change or bring more awareness to like what's going on in that area. So that I feel like I know what you mean by that being like the fine line there.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example because it's like this whale story resonating with you and a lot of people around the world. Like the Tour
Yeah,
of Grief in 2018, why that was such a big deal is, yeah, we know that they've done this before, but the length of time and the amount of travel this whale did was unheard of. And especially women who have lost children who saw that really resonated. And so I think that is such a great example of, you know, this whale is in her world, in her existence, doing her thing, and that spoke to people. I think where it gets a little tricky is when people are like, "Oh, she's carrying her baby on purpose so that we see it," and turning that into their narrative. That's the line for me. It's being
yeah.
inspired by them. Absolutely love that. But to say that you know their intention or why, that's where it's a little murky for me personally.
Yeah, yeah. I think what's powerful about that is that it clearly shows that they're very sentient and emotionally feeling animals and beings. And I think that that makes it very important and inspiring to help them, you know, to help make sure that they aren't a population that we know all their names and they're going to go extinct, that we could hopefully change that going forward.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we know through the science that they are incredibly complex emotional animals. What is it? There's like a ratio where they measure certain parts of brains to your body mass, and based on that measurement, orcas supposedly have the brain that processes emotions is, granted, their brain is substantially bigger than ours, but based on the format of comparing it to body size, supposedly they have can their emotional brain is significantly larger compared to ours in comparison to our body sizes. So they might have the ability to have emotions and thoughts and things that we as humans don't even understand because
Right.
our brains are different. And so it's just and that's why I always caution people like, well, yeah, maybe she's trying to tell you something. Definitely think it's grief, but to say as a human I know what a whale is thinking, that's like we really don't.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the most we can do is observe and relate. And I think that, you know, that's where I like to strike that emotional chord, is the relatability, but not assessing that like I know why this,
Right.
outside of like basic facts of, okay, I know this animal is capable of grief and I think that's what's going on. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's why also science is so important, like learning all of the facts and the knowledge and being able to get all that data to be able to learn more about them. I truly think that cetaceans in general are just so much more intelligent and in a different way than us, right? Like you said, even in their brain, like size and comparison. I just think that we don't know how intelligent animals are. I think that there's like a different type of intelligence that we just don't understand because we're coming through it from a human perspective. So that'll be, I think that's like an interesting thing that hopefully science can help, and I'm sure with AI, there's obviously like pros and cons to AI, but I think that hopefully we can start to learn more about their intelligence, their language, because they have such a complex language, which is really cool. Um, Hi, wild ones. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. This episode is sponsored by my clothing brand, Femme Sauvage, and you can find a discount code and link in the description. So check it out. We have a lot of amazing designs, and $5 of the proceeds goes to different charities. So please feel free to check it out and enjoy the rest of the episode. Thanks so much. You guys have like some of the things that you guys do. I know you guys do a lot to help them, but you guys have the hydrophones that you listen to them as well, right?
So we have one hydrophone in Edmonds, Washington, and it's part of a network. And within this network, there are a lot of other locations. But our chief scientist, Dr. David Bain, helped pioneer the AI that is used with the Orca Sound network. So Dave and many folks with Orca Sound worked with Microsoft volunteers as part of the hackathon to design this AI program. And how it works is it listens to all of the Orca Sound hydrophones, ours included, and it's listening 24/7, and it's programmed to detect whale calls. And so once it picks up a whale call, it notifies one of our users on the back end. And the point of this is so that we can notify selected entities when the whales are present. So cargo ships, ferries, anybody that we think would need to know that so that they can slow down or give them space. Now, granted, in the daytime we have so many eyes on the water, and a lot of these ship captains are also really good about reporting the whales. We even have Coast Guard has this cetacean sighting desk where they will compile all of the sightings and then report to vessels as necessary. So there's a whole network of it. But why the hydrophones are especially helpful is because weather can change, and we have nighttime to where
Mhm.
these vessels can be out in the water. That doesn't mean they're going to see them. And the local sightings networks are definitely not going to be able to see them at nighttime. So the hydrophones basically give us eyes at night. And these are going to be really helpful in not only mitigating vessel traffic, but also like in the event of emergency. So if there's an oil spill, we can monitor hydrophones at night to kind of track where animals are and make assessments and do all that. So, that's what we're using with the hydrophones, and we're in the process of trying to get a couple more installed. It's when we don't have a property owner that has exactly what we need, like what we had in Edmonds. It does make the process a little trickier because we have to find property that has electricity and somewhere we can get internet to get these hydrophones linked to AI and live streaming. Oh yeah,
Right.
and if anyone ever wants to listen to these hydrophones, they are live streaming all the time, and you can do
That's
so on the
fun.
Orca Sound Network. Um, but yeah, and then there's permitting and all of these other things. So we're trying to get a hydrophone in Seattle, and we're going on year 2 of trying to work through the permitting and the application process and all of that, which is like that's one of
Really
the
hard.
the projects that I manage. And there's just a lot of moving pieces, and
Sure.
you have to get approval from the city and all of these other agencies. So it's slow moving, but we're trying to get one in Seattle. We want to get one in Rosario Strait at some point, and then hopefully maybe Strait of Juan de Fuca, so we can just get ears all over. So the goal is like to be able to track them at anywhere, anytime, and it only works when they make noise. But
Right.
the southern residents are very loud much of the time, so
Yeah.
transients
Very
not so
vocal.
much. Transients are pretty quiet, but once in a while they'll make some sounds. But yeah, given that the southern residents are the critically endangered ones, they're the ones that we're especially
And that
want to know
works.
about.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure that's great because it's non-invasive to them. Like, they don't even know that's even there. So,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And we at Orca Conservancy are really about non-invasive research. And so much of, there's a lot of organizations doing great work with like drone studies and going out in boats. And we just are like, you know what? They're already all doing that. We don't need more boats bothering them. So we tend to shift our focus to other aspects. Our associate researcher Chloe Kotick is getting her PhD in studying the toxins in transient killer whales, and then Dr. Dave is got his hands in many cookie jars and doing a lot of stuff with like fisheries and sound and a lot of that. So our contribution to research is very non-invasive.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's so cool that people can listen to the live stream and hear them. And are they more vocal too because they use that echolocation to hunt and eat fish and stuff?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The reason why southern residents are vocal is because salmon aren't going to be detoured by sound the way that a seal or a sea lion is. So, a seal or sea lion hears you echolocating or you chatting with your family and you're a killer whale, that seal is going to be like, I'm going to get out of here. I don't want to be eaten today. And
Right.
so the transients they do echolocate, but not as much as the southern residents. So they might do like a ping
Hmm.
and for anyone who doesn't know what echolocation is, it's they emit clicks, and these clicks bounce off objects and come back and are received in their brain, and they basically can create a map of their surroundings. It's like sonar, and so the transients might do like a click or two to kind of get that map, see where things are, but they will use passive listening and their eyesight to hunt, as where the salmon aren't going to flee if they hear clicks. They're just going to go about their salmon lives. And so southern residents are fascinating because they'll like all use their echolocation together. So it's like if I'm echolocating this way and I'm getting my clicks come back, you're going to hear your clicks come back, and that's going to help you with your map, and your clicks going the other way are going to help me with my, like all of us together clicking in different ways, we can make this big constructed map together. And then they
So cool.
can, yeah, and then they'll have different calls and sounds. And so I just I always joke around, like when people are like, oh, why don't transients and southern residents hang out, or why do transients leave when residents come by? And I always make the joke, well, it's because the southern residents don't shut up. Like it's kind of hard to
They talk
sneak
too
up on
much.
something. Yeah, it's kind of hard to sneak up on something when you have this other type of killer whale that's making noise and tipping off your awareness to
That's so
prey.
funny.
So don't know if that's for sure. It's just kind of a little joke I
It
like to
makes
say.
sense.
Yeah.
And especially because the southern residents like drive off the transient sometimes. Like, hey,
Yeah.
hey, get out of here! Get out of
Yeah.
here!
Yeah. It's like a gigantic family party reunion almost constantly, because
Yeah.
southern residents travel with their intermediate family and their extended family, as where transients travel in much smaller family groups to optimize hunting. Because if you travel with your entire family and you're trying to hunt a seal, I imagine that's not going to go well.
Right. Yeah, it reminds me, I also come from like a big Italian family and we're all very loud and obnoxious. So another
Yeah,
way I
that's a
can relate to the southern residents.
good comparison. It's like if your whole family at a gathering was trying to go hunt together.
Yeah.
I feel like it'd be all the animals that are prey are gonna be like, I'm out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Like
So
grandma.
that's the believed reason why transients are far less vocal and not heard on hydrophones quite as much. We do hear them a lot more when they're in multiple groups. So when multiple matron get together, we call that a tea party.
Oh, that's cute.
In comparison, when all three southern resident pods are together, that's called a super pod. So you have super pod, and then when transients do it, it's a tea party.
That's
But when you see the multiple groups together, that's when you see a lot of the social behavior, and that's when you'll hear them vocalize a lot more because they're not hunting, they're socializing.
that's so cool. I love that. I guess a little bit off the subject, but obviously still on southern resident killer whales. So, um, a lot of SeaWorld, right? They got a lot of their orcas from that area where the southern residents were, right? Like they took a big chunk. Did that affect their population? I know it like went up and down, but like, do you think that that really affected their population when they captured them?
So there's some truth to that. SeaWorld, I think, had a couple of them, but I think there's also a lot that come from different parts of the world, like the Atlantic. But yes, the
Or maybe just
captures,
captivity in general? Yeah.
yeah, I would say captivity in general, because I think a lot of the southern residents went to marine land and like parks that are no longer in existence.
Yeah.
And then the last southern resident that was alive was at marine land, and she passed away in, was it 2023? Lolita or Tokate. But yes, the captures did play a huge role in diminishing the population, because they went in and took a bunch of the young calves, and the calves were ideal because they could be trained as where, and they'd be easier to transport than a fully grown adult whale. And so
Right.
they removed, depends on which research you're looking at, but they removed 2 to 4 generations, breeding generations, from those populations. And so the southern residents started to make a comeback. It was in the 90s. I think they came close to having 100 individuals, going from, I want to say, 59 sometime post captures. They started rebounding, and then they started dropping again. And then that's around that time is when they officially got enlisted as endangered. So, fun fact, while the scientific community rejects the notion that there are different species, legally, the southern residents are determined to be a separate species. That's how they won the lawsuit to
Interesting.
be enlisted. And Orca Conservancy was a big part of getting them enlisted. So,
Orca
anyways,
Conservancy.
yeah, I think I was writing my research paper when I was starting to study marine biology in college as that was happening, and I was covering it. So it's kind of a neat
Oh,
little
cool.
circle for me that I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm now with the organization that was part of this. But so it's interesting, yeah. So legally they're different species. Science has not caught up to that. But my squirrel trail, I lost my train of thought. We were talking about, so what
The
were we talking
cap
about? Oh yes,
captive.
captures.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So no, they've not fully recovered from that. And then so in addition to having multiple breeding generations removed, that's impacting genetic diversity as well. And so because there's, as of this recording, counting the new calf J63, as of this recording there are 73 individuals in the southern residence. And so as the number stays in the low 70s or lessens, that means there's less genetic diversity, which is also going to work against them in the long run. And so losing that many whales, because whales weren't just taken, some were killed, some died from the stress. And so there was a
Yeah.
big chunk that did not make it through that capture period. So that does have a huge impact, and why it is a continuous uphill battle to try to protect these whales, because they
Right.
had a bunch taken, and then now we have all of these other problems that impact them.
Right. Because even if they were to have been able to catch up like they kind of did, then all of these other things that are happening to them with the pollution and sound and their food source is, like you said, compiling into not helping them grow further.
Yeah. And I genuinely believe, and I think most experts would agree. I know my science team agrees, and you'll hear this echoed through the whale community, the orca community a lot. The number one thing that we can do to help the southern residents and actually make an impact is to recover their food, because we see this with the
Mhm.
transients, that because they eat marine mammals and because of bioaccumulation and biomagnification, they have more toxins in their body, but they're having significantly more success rates with pregnancy. Granted, they do have the same issue with losing calves and toxins impacting them, but not as significantly as we're seeing it with the southern residents, because it goes back to the fat storage and the nutritional health. And so if we can recover food, if we can get their food up to the numbers where it can sustain them, these other factors, while they are still going to exist, aren't going to be as detrimental as they are now. And we know that through seeing this other ecotype and what's happening with them. And so I'm just such a big proponent, and Orca Conservancy is as well as, we joke around, we're like, we call ourselves Orca Conservancy, but really we should be called Salmon Conservancy, because so much of what we do is based around salmon. And
Right.
we have salmon habitat restoration events almost every month. I feel like we're constantly watching and commenting on legislation around salmon. And when I get interviewed or when I talk to people, sometimes I'm like, am I talking more about orcas or salmon right now? But they're so important. Salmon are critical for killer whale survival.
It's like, and one of the things that I love and find fascinating about just nature in general is how interconnected everything is, right? Like, I love that you guys were, removing invasive species and planting native trees back into certain areas, and that helps the salmon population as well, right?
Oh yeah, and it's so neat because it's all interconnected and intertwined. So some people are like, well, why take the invasives out? Why not, like they're doing well? And the reason is a lot of these invasive species, like blackberry bushes, not the native blackberry bushes, but I'm blanking on the species that was imported from Europe a long time ago. Those ones, what happens is they will take over an area and choke out other types of plants and plant species. So you have this beautiful tree that might be starting to grow and it's going to offer a nice shade over the river or the creek. Well, come blackberry bush, it's going to choke it out and that tree's going to die. And blackberry bushes, while they can get tall, they're not going to really provide the shade that is needed. And so we deal a lot with blackberry bushes, and we deal a lot with reed canary grass. So one of our sites, it's we call it the CWA site. It's in Covington. It used to be a cattle farm, so they had planted all of this canary grass in there because the cattle would eat it. But now that the cattle are gone, it's getting out of control. And like the only way to really kill it is to smush it down. But it grows so tall and so fast. It's just like so much of the maintenance on that site is just managing this weed canary grass. And then when we plant trees, we have to do things like build mulch rings around where the trees are to protect it from these invasives coming in and choking them out so they don't grow. Um, and then the benefit of trees and native shrubs is it's going to benefit other animal populations,
Right.
specifically insects, which juvenile salmon eat certain types of insects. And so then you also have the root structure will help prevent erosion and will protect toxins and sediments, dangerous sediments from getting into the river, which can be lethal to salmon. So the trees provide shade, keep water cool. They filter out pollution. They prevent erosion. Another way they prevent erosion is the tree canopies. When it rains heavily, it kind of disperses the rain flow. As where
Mm.
without those trees, if it's just raining, that bank is going to erode really quickly, and then whatever toxins or trash or anything that's in that soil, once it gets in the river, then it's in the water system, gets in the food chain, gets into salmon, gets into orcas. So there's a lot going
Right.
on with restoration. And what I love the most about restoration, because I talk about, dam removal is very important, but that is a very time consuming project. And best
Right.
case scenario, dams come down tomorrow, it could still take upwards of 20 years to see the environment completely bounce back at a level that will sustain the southern residents. Southern residents don't have 20 years, and that's assuming that we get the green light to remove dams, which is in itself a battle.
Yeah.
Um, as we're still we're still a big proponent of dam removal, but salmon restoration is amazing because it's a very quick return on investment. And so we look at all of
Mhm.
these salmon habitat restoration sites as buying the southern residents time while we can push these bigger ticket items like dam removal. And
Yeah,
so,
Yeah, that's amazing. It's like something you could do right now with your hands.
Mhm.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, because some people, I've run into this, and I'm like, I'm not saying I definitely support dam removal, but some people, that's their only platform. That's the only thing they talk about. And it's like, honestly, the Southern residents don't have time for, the Snake River dams to come down at the rate that they are, because they're not, especially under the current administration, those dams are not being touched. They're not coming down anytime soon. And
Yeah.
so we kind of have to figure out, okay, when we take the analogy death of a thousand cuts, well, dams are just one cut. Okay, so we have to keep pushing that, but we do have to keep tending to the other cuts and finding band-aids for those. And restoration is such a beneficial, fast return thing that
Yeah.
happens. People can get involved, they can volunteer, and it's beneficial to not just orcas and salmon, it's beneficial to all kinds of things in the ecosystem, and our communities included. And so yeah, we're really very pro restoration.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I feel like like I can see how that could be a really tough battle with the dams, right? And it's not an immediate fix. And even if you were tomorrow to be able to fix that, it's going to take a long time to be able to um see that. Now, if so you were saying that like the southern residents don't have like 20 years to be able to like I guess like to put into perspective for people that maybe like don't understand like the time clock that's on southern residents.
Yeah, so with there only being 73 and that population holding, they're not past the point of no return. There's a
Right.
specific number, I want to say it's in the 60s, that scientists have basically deemed if the population gets below this number, there's no guarantee for recovery. And
Wow.
so in the low 70s, we're uncomfortably close to that threshold of when they are deemed. And I forget what the status is. It's kind of, you see it with the vaquita porpoises
Right.
in the Baja area, but there's other species that I think it's called depleted. And there's a population of orcas of specific transient orcas in or not California, Alaska, that a couple of them are still alive, but that population it's not extinct, it's not endangered, they're depleted. So it's kind of that middle between
Mhm.
extinction. So when the current survivors die, then that population will be extinct. And what happened with that Alaska population was the Exxon Valdez oil spill in the was it the 80s?
Right.
And so just their exposure to the oil, the long term impacts have basically decimated that population. So I'd have to please fact check me on this because I
Sure.
don't
Yeah.
know the number off the top of my head. I want to say it's in the 60s, maybe the 50s, but there is a marker in which this population will be considered depleted. And we're not there yet, knock on wood, and we hope to not be there, and we hope to keep
Yes.
them going up. And so we always say, like, the house is on fire. People are more willing to come put the fire out if they think there's a chance to save the home than if they think it's a loss. So we're at the point where we
Right.
can still save the home.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm a big proponent of not just one thing, not just dams. We need to be looking at dams. We need to be looking at restoration. We need to be looking at different legislations and habitat protection. Like there's so many pieces of it that need to happen, but I think sometimes people can silo into one thing, and one thing isn't going to do
Yeah.
it. We have many things. And if I may, I'd like to add one more thing about my
Please. Yeah.
please join my restoration cult mindset.
Please. Yes.
Um, so in my area, I live just a little bit north of Seattle. We have two major restoration projects that have happened in this area. We have one that is, if anyone is familiar with Puget Sound geography, we have one that's at the mouth of the Snohomish River or Port Susan. It's called the Blue Heron Slough. This used to be factories, and then when factories went away, it just became like a water. It was like wetlands, but it was just basically like where factories dumped their stuff.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
then north of that, so in Puget Sound, we have an island called Camano Island that's attached to the mainland. And when you're driving from the mainland to Camino Island, that there's kind of flats that all used to be farmland, and they call that Leak Island. And so, in the last 10 or so years, they have done Blue Heron Slough and Everett. They've done this massive restoration project with a focus on salmon habitat. And then up on Leak Island, which is the mouth of the Stillaguamish River, they've done a lot of restoration, taking out all that farm stuff and
Amazing.
letting it restore to wetlands. And I feel like this is one of my little citizen science projects that I've been talking about doing for years, and one day I'm gonna just do it. Is in the years that they've done restoration in these areas, from my loose followings of these areas, fish have been returning to these
Mm.
rivers and these areas more so than when they were just pollution sites. And with that, I'm noticing the southern residents are also starting to spend more time in these areas or going places
Uh,
where historically they stopped going to, or just we don't see them there. So El Pod, went into Pen Cove. I don't think there's a lot of food in Pen Cove. I genuinely think they were getting out of the wind that day. But they went into Port Susan, which it's like, oh my gosh, they've done it twice now, to my recollection, in the last 5 years. And it's like they never used to go in there, and now they're starting to kind of peek around. And I asked my scientists, I'm like, should we be worried? Like, is this a sign of desperation? Like they can't find food anywhere? Are they looking somewhere
mm.
else, or does that mean they're going in there because there's food? And I think the main theory right now is they're going into these places because there's potentially food, because we see them return. That if there wasn't food, we don't think they would keep returning. And so I
Oh,
like
it's
to use those
amazing.
two huge restoration projects to say there is a correlation between the southern residents spending time in this area to these massive projects happening. And so I want to pull the fish return data, pull the whale sightings data, and kind of map it out with the timeline of those restorations to kind of say, hey, this is really valuable. Let's get more money into these projects from grant levels, city levels, state levels, county levels, you name it. I'm like, fund it, because
Yeah.
it makes a difference.
That's so amazing. Oh, that would be really great because like you said, everything is so interconnected and it's just to me, I mean, I know like, there's obviously people out there that unfortunately don't agree, but I mean it to me it seems like such a win-win. Like, what people don't understand and like I've had somebody on her name's Edith Leoso and she lives near the Great Lakes, and her focus is on clean water. And I think that that is such a big importance because us as humans, and obviously all animals and creatures, but especially for humans, the most important things are food, water, and shelter. So I don't think you could ever go wrong with trying to get toxins and cleaning up our environment and just making it a better and stronger and healthier place to live. And then of course we love that would hopefully enact positive change for these endangered southern residents as well.
Absolutely. And that's like the easy answer, but we live in a world where development and sourcing things for energy contrasts a lot of what we need to be doing to protect the environment. And that's where it gets really, really difficult in the conservation community, is going up against developers who have far
Right.
more money than we have, and trying to say, hey, we don't want you to develop this land. And okay, there's these endangered species and all of these things, but the way that politics have been shifting is that red tape that we use to defend these things becomes, what's the word? How do I want to say this? Just kind of becomes process for the
Right.
decision makers, and it's kind of like they're just doing it because they have to, but they'll just push through stuff anyways. And we see that a
Mhm.
lot.
Yeah.
We see that going on up in Canada right now with the Trans Mountain Pipeline and the Roberts Banks Terminal 2 expansion. Um, the Canadian government just said, "Yep, go ahead. We don't care about all these environmental impact studies that say this is going to be detrimental." And it wasn't just orca and fish people. There were bird people. There were wetlands people. All of these organizations were banding together to file lawsuits and appeals. And Canadian government actually broke their own laws with how they pushed through these projects. But we live in capitalistic societies where sometimes the person with the bigger wallet wins, and that is a huge challenge in conservation, is mitigating some of these projects and you know taking losses sometimes.
Yeah, that sucks. And I know we're wrapping up here, but I had a question too about the dams. So the dams, are those basically just like an energy source? Like what are they originally used for?
Yeah, so well, first I don't want to say like everything is bad. So Klamath, a bunch of dams on the Klamath are coming down. Finally, yay.
Mm.
Orca Conservancy was a big, we've been pushing on that for years. So we're very
That's
happy,
awesome.
and we're hearing that fish are already starting to return to those rivers, and we think that this is going to have a huge impact, a very good impact on southern residents. Now I'm going to move over to the lower four Snake River dams because those are the ones that you'll hear people talk
Right.
about the most with these southern residents. And so the Snake River dams have two main purposes. One is power supply, but from the studies that I've seen, there's one that came out in 2022. It was a financial impact study, and it showed that it actually costs more to operate and power the dams than they're getting from providing electricity. So they're kind of operating at a loss.
Yeah.
But there are communities that are really dependent on them, and that's why it's such a complicated
Issue.
issue. Is because we don't just want to pull the plug on those communities. We have to figure out a way that's going to benefit them, get them situated, then pull the plug on these dams. So it's very
Of
nuanced, very
course.
complicated. But the other thing that the dams offer is kind of like a lock system for barges and cargo carrying ships to travel on riverways, so that they
Okay.
can travel further upriver. But the argument against that is, well, we have trains and railways. Like, do we really need to be using rivers as a travel route?
Right.
So yeah, those are the two main things that you'll hear about the Snake River dams is the power and I think maybe something to do with irrigation, but I'm less
Well, now,
familiar
yeah.
on that. Yeah, I don't want to talk out of
Yeah,
my butt.
because obviously like just thinking and because I feel like I've seen online too, there's like that positive news guy, which is really cool, and he always comes out with really cool stuff. But like just thinking about the energy portion of that, somebody came up, which I feel like would be really great to help with the energy portion of that. There's these, they basically look like kind of like those inflatable things that you see in front of like car washes or something like that,
Yeah.
but without the wacky inflatable arms, and like they just kind of go straight up and they're moved by the wind. So it's like wind energy and stuff like that. I mean, that's just what I saw, and I'm just thinking like that could maybe be something that could be transitioned or something like that, and it doesn't seem to be like super cost effective. And I know sometimes with the wind turbines those affect birds too, so it
Mhm.
just goes straight up and it just kind of gets pushed around, and then because it gets pushed around it produces energy. I'm obviously not like a scientist or anything like that, but I think that it's a positive thing that, hey, maybe we could think of more unique ways um that could help or produce something else, and maybe just change that so it's not so negatively affecting other things like the environment.
Yeah, it's an interesting point with the wind turbines, and we do have them in Eastern Washington. I think solar, to my understanding, I don't know. I don't know the negative sides of solar, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are some. But solar seems like
Yes.
the least invasive way to,
Yeah.
you're not interrupting bird migration routes. But the wind turbines, I kind of want to touch on something quick. It's interesting that you bring
Yeah.
that up because we right now are trying to stop some tidal turbines, so underwater turbines, from being installed in Rosario Strait of critical salmon habitat. So it's
um,
basically works, to my understanding, the same way that wind, so it's just like propellers spinning. But we worry about the noise it's going to create in the southern
mm,
resident habitat because it's constant. It's not like a boat that's coming and going, it's there all the time. And we also worry about the impact it'll have on fish species that swim through there, salmon included, and might get chopped up.
That's
So
my immediate thought. Yeah.
yeah, and so it's like it's interesting because people will use dams to say it's green energy or tidal turbines, and it's packaged as green energy, but I feel like the energy conversation kind of we have to look at it as like, okay, is the energy we're gaining worth the offset we're creating? And I'd say with like the tidal turbines, no. The dams, absolutely not.
Right.
Wind, I'm not as plugged into that, but I feel like a lot of
Yeah.
those turbine companies have worked with like the Autobahn specifically, the Autobahn Society to maybe kind of offset. I don't know how effective that is, but
Sure.
if you can prevent, if there's a way to like mitigate birds from getting in those turbines, like it's a fantastic energy source in my opinion. But
Right.
um, with the turbines they're trying to put in here, it's only going to power like a few neighborhoods on one island. So it's like the amount of like the return that you're getting from this massive thing is just like
Doesn't really fit
it's
the,
so
yeah.
frustrating that it's just a money grab. And I think going back to the difficulties of conservation going against you know capitalism in a way
Yeah.
is we see this with the dams a lot. You get these companies that have a lot of money and just want to do something quickly, and then they'll lobby for it and they'll invest commercials and advertisements and go into these communities and say like this is so good and you depend on it, you need it, and just kind of convinces them that there's no other
Yeah.
alternative. And it can be exhausting. But green
Yeah.
energy isn't always green. Some are better than
Right.
others. I've heard of different farmers in eastern Washington doing different things to not depend on the Snake River dams and kind of trying to use that to say, hey, it's possible. There are other things that exist that are actually better, but you do have the company that owns the dams basically lobbies to tell those people, no, you depend on them, you have to have them. And so that's another layer
The
to
whole
it.
other, yeah, I can understand how that could be frustrating too, especially because like you've done all this work with trying to do the hydrophones and like letting boats know and to slow down, and then like it kind of is like shitting all over that with the the trying to put that in underneath. But yeah, it's fascinating. There of course is never like a one size fits all fix to everything, and these each issue is very complicated. So, I mean, I really commend you guys at the Orca Conservancy for, having your hands on so many, handles, because it's a lot, but I know you guys are really doing a lot. And I love the restoration project. Um, I've definitely learned so much from you. And thank you so much for coming on, and tell people how they can connect, how they can help, connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us on all of the major social media platforms, including the new ones, Blue Sky. I feel like there's one I'm missing. So we're on
Yeah.
Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter or X,
Yeah.
Blue Sky, Threads. Yeah. And you can find us and YouTube. We are at Orca Conservancy, so Orca Space Conservancy. You can just Google it, you can find us, and our website is www.orcaconservancy.org. We have lots of volunteer opportunities, especially if you're in the area and you want to come to our restoration events. All of that, ways you can help, more information about the orcas, even if you want to learn about the biographies of the individual southern residents and our most commonly seen transients. We have biography pages, we have tons of resources on our website. So check
Lovely.
us out.
I'll definitely link that below. And if you're in the Pacific Northwest area, you guys have those awesome flashcards to be able to identify the different, orcas, to see them for yourself in the wild and identify those individuals, which I love too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I did the artwork for the transient deck and all of the updated southern residents. So a very fun project.
That's
I'm very passionate
awesome.
about our flashcards, and I love how popular and successful they've been. So we're gonna keep doing them. So every year when we
Awesome.
get new calves or the calves are growing up, we do expansion packs. So anyone who buys the original deck or the an older deck And once new individuals, you don't have to buy the new deck every time. You can get the little pack to expand.
Oh,
the
that's
collection.
awesome. And
Yeah.
remember, they're eye patches. They're sisters, not twins.
Yeah, yeah. The eye patches are not on the flashcard, but the dorsals and the saddle patches are. So on one
Okay.
side, it's the images, the artwork of the two, the left and the right, and then the back, it's smaller images with descriptions and tips to help you remember the specific shapes of the dorsal and the saddle.
That's awesome. I love that. And I'll make sure to link everything below so it's much more easily accessible for everybody that's listening. And thank you so much, Tamara, for coming on today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for
I
having me.
learned so much from you.
Thank you. Yeah, and it was nice getting like actual FaceTime with you.
Yes, I loved that. And I really hope one day I can visit and help with a restoration project. That would be so fun. So
Yeah.
Definitely on my bucket list.
Well, let me know, and yeah, tell me when you're here and I will take you to see the whales.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Wild Ones, for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.
Revel in the moment like a river flowing to the sea. I feel the energy of life force flowing